What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, it's Diamond, back with another video. Today we are reacting to Top 18 Scary True Stories compilation, March through October 2017. This is 2 hours, but we're actually gonna skip some of these stories to make it short. So yeah, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share. Let's get right into the video.
So, before we start, some background. I have a group of friends, and we've all known each other since kindergarten. There's 4 of us, me and 3 more guys. We're all 29 or 30 at the time of writing, and we're 28 or 29 at the time of the event. We're all really close, even though ever since college we meet up very rarely. All of us were in long-lasting and steady relationships, either married or the modern equivalent. That is, except for the main subject in the story, who had just come out of a pretty messy divorce. This friend, Andy, had been having a really rough time of life, as his ex-wife decided to leave him right as his mother was dying of cancer. So it was understandable that we were all a bit worried about him. Well, one of my friends has a pretty nice country house that's far away from civilization, far enough to allow for a nice weekend retreat every once in a while. At the start of this story, we had one of those trips scheduled. The week before, as we were all planning the retreat, Andy decided he wasn't going to go because he didn't want to be the only one without a significant other for the entire weekend. We all insisted, but we kind of understood his feelings, and since he had another event lined up during that weekend, we left it alone. Still, I wasn't really satisfied with that, as I felt he could really use the change of scenery. So I decided to give him a call on Saturday morning, right before I left for the country house, offer him a ride, and give him one last chance to show up. I called him from the door of my house, and he sounded kind of weird on the phone, like he was sluggish or something. I even joked with him about it. It was kind of early, and I assumed I had just woken him up. He didn't laugh or anything, so I figured he was pissed. When I offered to pick him up and give him a ride, he simply replied, "Okay." I told him to pack up a change of clothes and meet me in front of his house. Then off we went. It was me, the wife, and him in the car for a nice 45-minute drive. I started noticing things were off just as he got into the car. He was acting really stupid. I have no other way to put it. He didn't get any of the jokes, had trouble understanding simple questions, and kept replying with either a simple yes or no, or with a really slurred, short phrase at the most. At this point, me and the wife had every reason to be worried about him. We started thinking maybe he'd fallen into some weird state of depression, or started doing drugs. He refused to acknowledge that anything was wrong with him, and so we simply drove on, hoping he'd maybe open up later on. So, we all arrived. There was food and drinks and video games. Yes, we get away from civilization to play video games, and since we'd all been friends for over 20 years, there was lots of fun to be had. It quickly became obvious to all of us that Andy wasn't acting right. He wasn't playing any games, wasn't talking at all, and spent most of the time just looking at us or outside. As time went on, I noticed he wasn't eating or drinking anything at all.
What?
And one of the guys swears that he kept tabs on Andy and never once saw him go to the bathroom the entire trip. We tried to get him to talk, but he'd just give the exact same response every time.
Yes or no?
"I'm okay."
Okay.
He ended up winning the patience game, and so we all just left him to his own devices. The night went on. He sat on a bench outside, looking at a stretch of woods near the house. We all stayed indoors talking, and then we decided to sleep. Andy said he'd go soon. He just wanted to chill for a bit outside. We all let him be. The next morning, he was sitting outside, in the exact same place we left him, in
For
the
the
exact
whole
same
night?
position. And that was it. I was completely freaked out, and decided it was time to go back home. We packed our stuff and said our goodbyes. Everyone was really worried about Andy, but we all felt creeped out, so we just called it a weekend and left. I drove him home, dropped him off, and went back home myself. Later that night, we ended up all meeting each other again in a restaurant for a birthday get-together of a common friend. I noticed Andy was being himself again, and my other two friends looked really
How did he
puzzled.
get to the party?
I sat down and asked him, "Hey man, what the fuck happened yesterday?" He replied with something like, "Yeah, my car broke down, and Peter here had to pick me up in the middle of the night after the bar." Well, that made no sense, and so we all started asking questions and trying to piece everything together. Turns out, he was at the bar with a couple of the other guys at the exact same time he was with us at the country house. When we kept insisting, in a kind of panic, that that was impossible, multiple people showed us pictures of him at said event. Yeah, there were fucking pictures. So we all freaked out, and noticing that we weren't joking, Andy freaked out as well. We confirmed via phone history that his phone in fact got my call that Saturday morning, but he doesn't remember answering it. After this, the talk did continue, but we really couldn't get anywhere, and that was it. As the months passed by, the three of us all got really afraid of Andy and who he could be. We still have no idea who was with us at the house, and Andy has gotten really sick of hearing about this, to the point of getting really mad when the subject comes up. He says that the most rational explanation is that we all got confused and thought this up. I'm still nervous about that to this day, especially because I dropped him off at his home and saw him enter. Where the fuck did fake Andy go? Did he do anything while we were all asleep? Do any of you guys know anything like this? I asked around, and nothing really fits. I'm not really a believer in the paranormal, but I don't have any other explanation. I felt like writing this to get it out, as the other guys and my wife don't really like talking about it. It gets everyone real nervous.
You should. I'm gonna skip to the middle. Alright, I'm gonna do 3 stories.
One account of his death even states that he died in the arms of the lifeless Elena.
Story number 2. Mr.
There
One
used
Up.
to be this guy at our school growing up. He wasn't a part of my friendship circle, but it was the type of place where everyone knew everybody. Just a small institution in the countryside, with barely any students. Now, we like to call this guy Mr. One Up, because whatever story you told him, he just had to tell you how he'd done something even better. If you said you could bench press 130 pounds, he'd say he could do 150. If you told him you were learning to play the guitar, he'd tell you he once jammed with Kotaro Oshio backstage at a concert. It was all bullshit, of course.
Yeah.
I guess he had all of this self-assuredness because of his wealth. His parents were rich. Like, mega rich. The kind of money you can't lose in a lifetime, no matter how hard you try. They'd made their fortune, and decided to live a relaxed lifestyle out in rural Japan, away from the stress and dangers of the city. We must have been around 16 years old at the time this happened, and though girls were the only thing on our minds, we were still intimidated as hell by them. Those awkward teen years can be really hard for us nerdy kids. Not for One Up though. A lot of girls mistook his arrogance for confidence, and despite being average looking at best, he was seen as the school's very own Casanova. I remember how jealous I was when he started dating a girl I had a huge crush on.
I hate when that happens.
Suki.
Suki.
Long, black hair, big, dark eyes, perfect pale skin. Just a truly beautiful young woman. Despite her good looks, she wasn't one of the popular girls. In fact, she was quiet and studious. Mostly she kept to herself, but always seemed to be smiling and happy.
Tired. I'm recording this
As far
video
as
at
I
1
could tell,
o'clock.
she was just a normal, friendly girl. I'll be honest, I never had the balls to talk to her. Every morning, I'd look at myself in the mirror as I brushed my teeth, and silently told myself that today'll be the day I talk to Suki. Then, when the moment came, I'd chicken out, and today would become tomorrow. It turned up nothing. Suddenly, all my ill feelings towards One-Up vanished, and were replaced with genuine concern. He wasn't a bad guy after all, just a bit cocky. In turn, we were all asked about the last time we had seen One-Up, and to help with the investigation in any way we could. Suki was of course questioned too, but she was such a mild-mannered and sweet girl that she was
So,
eliminated as a
One-Up
suspect almost immediately.
Disappear?
I would overhear her at school, sobbing
think
to other
that
girls about her missing
Suki-
boyfriend. Well, ex-boyfriend, I
I
guess,
think that
though she never
Suki
phrased it like that.
is
One-Up's parents spent a
the
fortune
criminal.
trying to find their son. They spent thousands on private investigators and local media campaigns. Though they remained hopeful, I'm sure deep down they were preparing for the worst. Not many kids go missing for 3 weeks straight and turn up alive after all. The 4th week rolled around, and word about town was that unbelievably, One-Up had been found alive.
What?
Neither I nor any of my friends were sure if this was true or not. There was nothing in the local paper about it, only a few whispers here and there from people who knew the guy better than we did. It was as these rumors started circulating that Suki, the sweet, young ex-girlfriend, stopped attending school herself. She just vanished. People were saying that she wasn't as innocent as she pretended to be. Far from it. Apparently, she was excessively controlling. That's why One-Up had dumped her in the first place. If he so much as looked at another girl, she would go absolutely ballistic and even threaten him with violence. She demanded his full and undivided attention, and even started telling him he couldn't hang out with his friends and had to spend every free moment with her.
Wow.
According to those closest to One-Up and his family, Suki had become enraged when she was dumped. After school one day, she persuaded One-Up to meet with her and try to work things out. She took that opportunity to drug the poor guy. Since then, she had been keeping him in a perpetually drugged state, tied up and held captive in an abandoned shack, like a sort of pet boyfriend.
Oh my god.
She would visit him every day after school, so that the pair of them could spend some quality time together. None of this could be
Quality
true,
time.
surely. There's no way Suki could have done something so unimaginably monstrous. Something that would require so much evil planning and preparation. But then again, why'd she stop coming to school? Had the police arrested her after all? Had she gone on the run? A few days later, I found out that the rumors were true about One-Up. He had indeed turned up alive. I saw him outside his house. Furniture from his home was being loaded into a removal van. One-Up looked emaciated. His face was sunken and pale. Whatever had happened to him in that month, it had aged him well beyond his years. That was the last time I ever saw the guy. He and his family moved away after that. I don't know where to.
Wow.
There was no big media storm about the whole thing. It was all kept very quiet. It was weird how little everyone knew about it. As for Suki, she was found not long after, about 30 kilometers away, face down in a puddle of water in a small cave near a shrine. 2 deep slash wounds down her wrists and forearms showed that she had bled herself dry. She had been dead for at least a week before she was found. Because her face had been submerged, it had decomposed at a faster rate than the rest of her body. I feel sorry for the person who discovered her. It did seem strange that the girl had gone all that way to the cave to kill herself. Perhaps it had some sort of significant meaning to her. Who knows what was going on inside her head. people didn't really question it. Crazy people do crazy things, and that's that. Recently, however, a buddy of mine did tell me something a little strange. His brother-in-law was a cop in the area, and apparently they started off their investigation assuming that Suki had been murdered. There was a blow to the back of her head that couldn't have been self-inflicted, as well as several small but noticeable defensive wounds on her arms. It seemed pretty obvious to him that someone had tried to make this look like a suicide. Not long after he started looking into the case, his superior officer told him to cease the investigation. Suki had killed herself, and that was that. No point wasting police resources by investigating further. My friend's brother-in-law protested, but his boss told him that his decision was final, and that if he valued his job, he'd fall in line and do as he was told. Needless to say, he did. I'm not sure if this was some sort of administrative error, or if something more sinister was going on. Either way, it really does make you think.
Alright guys, now we're moving on to the last story. And yeah. There. 1,000 steps.
Recently, and by recently, I mean like 8 months ago, I moved to an island in the South Pacific, and have gotten the hiking bug. So I try and get out to new locations as much as I possibly can, what with work eating into my precious time and all. This happened about 2 weeks ago.
Dang.
Since I live in the South Pacific region, it gets mighty hot, driving all but the most insane hikers indoors unless it's at night. Of course, I'm not a masochist, so I try to do all my hiking in the early hours of the morning, or in the evening when it starts getting cool. I've never been afraid of going hiking by myself. I did it when I lived in Oregon, and never ran into any problems. But then again, my island isn't my friendly home state. I always carry pepper spray, and when I used to go hiking in Montana and Wyoming, I would sometimes carry a handgun to ward off anything I couldn't handle by myself, whether that be a bear or a person. But I had always gotten off considerably lucky. I got to the trailhead at about 6:30 in the evening. The trail was called 1,000 Steps, but in all honesty, it was mostly just a walk straight down to the cliff, and then a grueling journey back up. I didn't want to go, but my dog, Mad Moxie, needed to be walked, and I had done the hike so many times, I could have probably done it in my sleep. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up was an old, rickety, rusted-out blue pickup truck with a big plastic tarp over the bed to keep the rain out. These are pretty common on the island, affectionately earning them the name Guam Bombs. I didn't think much of it as I hooked up Moxie and started heading down to the trail, trying my best to ignore the mosquitoes that were making a meal out of my exposed neck. Heading down to the trail was relatively easy. Avoiding the banana spider webs, I felt the stress of my day slowly unwind as the underbrush grew darker and night approached. I made it all the way down to the water's edge when I noticed a man standing about 100 yards away. It was dark enough now that I could only see his silhouette, so I have no idea whether he was looking at me or at the water, but I chose to ignore him, and instead pull Moxie's ball from my backpack and throw it for her a few times to get all her
Then I
wiggles
throw it
out.
towards him.
After some time, the man started walking over to me and stopped maybe about 10 feet away.
Oh god.
Now, I'm not a tiny waif of a woman. I'm 23 years old, and I stand at about 5'6". This guy was just a couple of inches taller than me, but something about him just felt weird. Evening, I greeted him, as he nodded and looked down at Moxie, who had just returned from running after her ball. I stooped down to pet her now sweaty head, as the man kept his eyes trained on my dog. "Can I help you, sir?" "Pretty dog," he responded mildly. "You alone?" I have my dog, I said lamely, trying to sound braver than I was feeling.
I would have
I
said
am
it's somebody
never
over
alone.
there.
I tried to emphasize on the fact that I had my dog with me, but the man seemed unfazed by my statement. Oh, have a good night. With that, he turned around and started walking back towards the trailhead. I watched his shadow disappear into the trees and waited for about half an hour before I too started walking back towards the path, my mind on high alert as Moxie pulled me through the trees and up the cliffside. The crickets pierced the night as I climbed the steps, illuminated by my flashlight. My hands were full with Moxie's leash and my light, but you could bet your buns I'd have my pepper spray out if I had an extra hand. Finally, my light pierced the trees at the top, and I practically booked it up the hill. When I got to the top, I nearly shat myself. The rusted blue pickup truck was sitting in the parking lot still, but their passenger side door was practically touching my car's driver's side.
What?
Inside the car, I could faintly see two men sitting in the cab, and I could feel them watching me. Slowly, I approached my car, walking as far over to the passenger side as I could, and kept Moxie with me as close as possible.
Yeah, it is
I
blocking the whole
opened the door
driver's seat.
and crawled over to the driver's side. At that moment, the door of the pickup truck flew open, and my dog started going apeshit, barking at the two people who were now outside of their car, and trying to break into
Lock the
mine.
door.
Heart in my chest, I rammed the keys into the ignition, and tore out of the parking lot so quickly, I nearly took my mirror off. I called my mum as soon as I got home, and she begged me to call the police. Unfortunately,
late to call the
police
police.
here on the island aren't as vigilant as they are on the mainland, and that area is known for car thefts, muggings, and other debaucheries, as I learned from my co-workers later that week. One thing stands out though. Earlier this month, another girl actually disappeared from that area without a trace, and it makes me wonder if the men in the blue pickup truck didn't have something to do with it. If I hadn't had Moxie with me, could that have been me?
Definitely.
If I learned anything from this experience, it's that for my lady hiker friends, please always take pepper spray with you. Go hiking
it
in
was a
groups,
girl?
and always
Okay.
let someone know where you're going. It might just save your life someday. Story update. I did call the cops about the missing female and the truck I saw. They said they'd investigate into it. So far, I haven't heard anything, but I fear for this woman's life and realize how easily it could have been my own. Also, I realize that hiking alone, especially as a female, is a dangerous pastime, and I do
Definitely.
realize again how foolish and naive I was being. But I have learned and plan to not hike alone anymore.
Right, Job. Never hike alone. Well, that's it for today's video. There will be a video uploaded tomorrow. I'm gonna upload this video right now. Yeah, I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.